whisper this story to you, I need you to understand something. I'm not here to convince you that Bigfoot is real. I'm not here to debate skeptics or prove anything to anyone. I'm here because what happened to me in those woods changed everything I thought I knew about what's possible. And if you've ever felt a presence in the forest, if you've ever heard something that made your blood run cold, then maybe, just maybe, you'll believe me. So turn down your lights, get comfortable, and whatever you do, don't stop listening until the end. Because the moment I stopped believing this was just a legend was the moment everything became terrifyingly real. My name is Sarah. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a wildlife photographer. I've spent the last 6 years traveling to remote forests, mountains, and wilderness areas across North America. I've photographed bears, wolves, elk, and countless other animals in their natural habitats. I've camped alone in places most people would never dare to go. I've never been afraid of the woods. The woods were my sanctuary, my escape, my home. But after what happened last September in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State, I don't feel safe anywhere anymore. Not because something tried to hurt me, but because something looked at me, and I looked back. And in that moment, I realized we are not alone in these forests. We never have been. It started as a simple assignment. A nature magazine hired me to photograph the fall colors in the North Cascades. Remote area, no cell service, no trails, just raw, untouched wilderness. Perfect for someone like me. I packed my gear, my tent, enough food for 5 days, and drove 8 hours to the trailhead. The ranger station was closed for the season, so I left a note on my truck dashboard with my planned route and expected return date. Standard protocol. I started hiking at dawn. The air was crisp, clean, and smelled like pine and wet earth. The forest was alive with sound, birds chirping, squirrels rustling through leaves, a distant creek bubbling somewhere to my left. Everything felt normal, peaceful, safe. But by the time I set up camp that first night, the forest had gone completely silent. If you've ever been in the wilderness, leave a comment, because you know what I'm talking about. That silence isn't peaceful. It's heavy. It's wrong. It's the kind of silence that makes every hair on your body stand up. I tried to ignore it. I built a small fire, made some instant coffee, and reviewed the photos I'd taken that day. Beautiful shots, golden aspens, misty valleys, a lone deer staring into the camera with perfect light. I should have been happy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I've felt that sensation before. When photographing predators, you learn to recognize it. The prickling on the back of your neck, the instinct that tells you to turn around slowly, to stay calm, to not run. But this felt different. This didn't feel like a bear or a cougar or anything I'd ever encountered. This felt intelligent, curious, patient. I scanned the tree line with my flashlight. Nothing, just shadows and trunks and darkness. I crawled into my tent, zipped it shut, and tried to sleep. But around midnight, I heard it. A sound I'll never forget. It started low vocalization, not quite a growl, not quite a voice, something in between. It was coming from the ridge above my camp, maybe 200 yards away. I held my breath, listening. The sound repeated, slower this time, deliberate, like it was calling. Without thinking, I unzipped my tent and stepped outside. I don't know why I did it. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to stay inside, but something deeper, something primal, pulled me forward. I stood at the edge of my campsite, staring up at the dark ridge. My flashlight felt useless. The beam barely penetrated the thick trees. And then I did something I'll regret for the rest of my life. I whispered. I don't know why. I don't know what I was thinking, but I cupped my hands around my mouth and whispered into the darkness. I know you're there. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then, from somewhere much closer than before, something whispered back. Not words, not language, but a sound that mimicked the rhythm of my voice. Soft, breathy, deliberate, like it was answering me. My legs went weak. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my tent. The whisper came again, closer. I could hear branches snapping, heavy footsteps, slow, methodical, moving down the ridge toward me. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the sound, and that's when I saw it. 2 eyes reflecting the light, but not like an animal's eyes. These were different, larger, set wider apart, and they weren't just reflecting light. They were looking at me, studying me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. And then it stepped into the clearing. I want you to understand something. I've seen bears stand on their hind legs. I've seen elk in the shadows that looked massive and strange. I know how the mind can play tricks in the dark. But this was not a trick. This was not a bear. This was not anything I'd ever seen before. It stood at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark, shaggy hair, broad shoulders, long arms that hung past its knees. Its face was almost human, but not quite. Flatter, wider, with a pronounced brow and deep-set eyes that gleamed with something I can only describe as awareness. It didn't charge, it didn't roar. It just stood there, watching me, breathing. I could see its chest rising and falling. I could hear the air moving through its nostrils. And then it did something that shattered every assumption I had. It raised one massive hand and placed a finger over its mouth, the universal gesture for silence, for quiet, for shh. My mind couldn't process it. I stood frozen, trembling, tears streaming down my face, and then it turned slowly, carefully, and walked back into the forest, not crashing through the trees, not running, just walking, like it had made its point, like it had answered my whisper, and now it was leaving. I don't remember getting back into my tent. I don't remember zipping it closed. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke up the next morning, everything felt different. The forest was alive again, birds singing, squirrels chattering, sunlight filtering through the trees. It was like the world had reset overnight. I packed up my camp as fast as I could. My hands were still shaking. I didn't care about the assignment anymore. I didn't care about the photos. I just wanted to leave. But before I started hiking back, I saw something. Near the edge of the clearing where it had stood, there were tracks. Massive, human-like, but not human. Each print was at least 18 inches long. Deep impressions in the soft earth. 5 toes, a clear arch, exactly where it had been standing. I took photos, dozens of them. I measured them with my hand for scale. I documented everything. And then I ran. I hiked faster than I ever had in my life. I didn't stop until I reached my truck 8 hours later. If you're still with me, if you believe me so far, drop a comment, because the story doesn't end there. When I got home, I tried to move on. I told myself it was a bear, a trick of the light, exhaustion and fear mixing into something my brain couldn't process. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my family, not even my editor. I deleted the photos of the tracks, and I tried to forget, but I couldn't. Because 2 weeks later, I found something on my camera. I always leave my cameras running overnight when I camp. Time-lapse mode, capturing the stars and any nocturnal wildlife that might pass through. I'd forgotten to check the footage from that night. When I finally opened the files, my blood turned to ice. The first few hours were normal, my tent glowing softly from the inside, the fire dying down, stars moving across the sky. But at 12:47 a.m., it appeared, walking into frame from the left, massive, unmistakable, moving slowly toward my tent. It stopped about 20 feet away, and it just stood there, watching, for over 3 minutes. I could see its chest moving. I could see its head tilting slightly, like it was listening. And then, at exactly 12:51 a.m., it turned its head directly toward the camera, like it knew, like it could see the lens, feel the technology, sense that it was being recorded. It stared into the camera for 10 seconds, and then it walked away, back into the forest. The footage continued until dawn. Nothing else appeared, just an empty campsite, and me sleeping inside my tent, completely unaware. I've watched that footage 100 times. I've analyzed every frame. I've sent it to people I trust, and every single one of them said the same thing. That's not a bear. That's not a person in a suit. That's something else. Some told me to go public, to share it with researchers, to prove that Bigfoot is real. But I can't, because I keep thinking about that moment when it raised its finger to its mouth, when it told me to be quiet. It didn't want to be seen. It didn't want to be recorded. It answered my whisper, not to reveal itself to the world, but to warn me, to let me know it was there, to tell me in its own way, I see you, and I choose to let you leave. If I share that footage, if I betray that trust, I don't know what will happen, but I know this. It knows where I was. It knows what I look like. And something deep inside me believes it would know if I broke the silence. I haven't been back to the Cascades since that night. I still work as a wildlife photographer. I still camp in remote places. But now I listen differently. I watch the tree lines more carefully. And sometimes late at night when I'm alone in the wilderness, I hear it, that low rumbling hum, that whisper that doesn't quite sound human. And I know I'm being watched, not by a monster, not by a myth, but by something ancient, something that's been here long before us, something that chooses to stay hidden, and I respect that now. I don't whisper into the darkness anymore. I don't call out. I don't try to make contact, because I learned something that night. Some things aren't meant to be found. Some mysteries are meant to stay mysteries. And some questions should never be answered. If you've ever heard something in the woods that you couldn't explain, if you've ever felt watched by something you couldn't see, if you've ever stood at the edge of the wilderness and wondered what's really out there, then you already know. You already understand. There are things in those forests, old things, intelligent things, and they're not hiding because they're afraid of us. They're hiding because they choose to, because they know something we don't, because some boundaries are meant to be respected. I'm whispering this to you now because I need someone to know. I need someone to understand. And maybe, just maybe, if you're out there in the wilderness someday and you hear that low hum in the distance and you feel the urge to whisper back, don't. Just listen. Just watch. Just respect the silence. Because if you whisper to Bigfoot, he might answer. And once he does, you'll never see the forest the same way again. If you made it to the end of this story, if you believe me, or even if you don't, leave a comment. Let me know I'm not alone. Let me know someone else out there understands what it's like to see something that shouldn't exist, and realize it was real all along. Because every night when I close my eyes, I see those two glowing eyes staring back at me, I see that massive hand raised to its mouth, and I hear that whisper echoing in my mind, and I know he's still out there, watching, waiting, protecting the silence, and I'll carry that secret for as long as I live.